Late at night, inside a moonlit mountain cave, a tiger pads softly across the stone floor. It lowers its head and sniffs the sleeping man's foot, its breath warm against his skin. Jia sits perfectly still as the beast draws nearer. He does not flinch. He has promised himself a strange kind of discipline. Jia Fengzhi was from the northern plains, a lean scholar with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. Everyone who knew him said he had talent like a hidden spring, clear, deep, and destined to burst. Why at the county exams would not open for him? Time and again he took the papers and came away empty-handed. One evening on the road he met a young scholar who called himself Lang Sheng. Lang wore his hair loosely, walked like a man who owed no one anything, and spoke as if every sentence had been polished. Jia invited him home, spread his essays on the table, and asked for a verdict. Lang read, folded the paper with the air of a man folding a sparrow's wing, and said, "Your writing is fine for the world of books. It would be enough to win the highest marks in theory. But the exam keeps other rules. You must either reach up and strain or bend down and stoop. The courts reward those who bow." Jia bristled. He named poets, teachers, great lines that could outlast an empire. To stoop for a title was vulgar. Lang smiled as if humouring a child and replied, "You think merit alone will open the right doors, but the men who decide are shaped by what they have always used. A bright page will not turn their eyes into new tools. If you insist on pure craft, then keep it for yourself. If you want the post, learn their language." He pointed at two men and a pair of essays, works Jia had once dismissed as shallow. Jia laughed and argued the point for the sake of principle. Lang left smiling and called him young and proud. When the county exam came next, Jia failed again. He went home sullen, his mind circling Lang's words. He picked up the essays Lang had named and tried to read them. The lines blurred, dull as weathered tiles. He nearly fell asleep and could not decide whether to change. 3 years passed. As the new county test approached, Lang came to the village again. He brought with him 7 model exam prompts he had prepared. "Write these," he said, handing them over. Jia wrote for a day and returned the pages. Lang shook his head, sent him back to try again. Each time, Jia laboured and Lang found fault. Fed up, Jia took his old, unreadable exam papers, pulled out every cliché, every pompous phrase, every inflated line he had ever loathed, and threw them together into one shambling essay. He left the rubbish piled like old clothes and went to Lang. Lang read and laughed out loud. "This will do," he said, and ordered Jia to memorize it. Jia protested, "I wrote this as a joke. It is not mine. I cannot carry such shamelessness in my bones." Lang was persistent. He made Jia recite the words again and again. Then he told him to strip his tunic and lie forward. With a steady hand, he drew a single stroke on the man's spine, a symbol like a fine black thread. "Only this," Lang said, "and you will not forget." Jia felt no pain. The ink seemed to sink into skin. He tried to wash it off, but it would not budge. Lang smiled at him like a conspirator and left with a few last instructions. "Keep to the lines I gave you. Forget your better taste for 3 days. When the exam falls, you will find only these words fit to speak. At the exam hall, the questions were exactly those 7 prompts. Jar opened his heart and found nothing else there but the sham essay he had thrown together. Shame crawled over him. He had the urge to change phrases, to strike a single line into something more noble. Every attempt left him paralyzed. The sentence would not move. He copied the vulgar paper down in slow, reluctant script. When he stepped out, Lang was waiting. "How did it go?" Lang asked. Jar confessed embarrassed and begged him to remove the mark from his back. Lang urged him to look, and when Jar did, the mark had vanished as if a tide had taken it. The memory of writing also felt like a dream. "Why don't you use this trick for yourself?" Jar asked. Lang smiled. "I never had the desire. It is easier to pass by not wanting what the world offers." They agreed Jar would visit the next day. Jar borrowed the 7 model essays from Lang to reread, and then, ashamed of what he had done, did not go back to the house. He felt small and secret. When the results were posted, Jar could barely stand. He had come first. He had become the local champion, the name at the top of the roll. The news should have made him proud. Instead, he felt sick, as if he had been applauded for wearing another man's skin. He sat with the papers and read them through again and again. With each line, sweat ran down his body. He thought, "How can I face other scholars with such borrowed words? Better to vanish into the hills and hide from all eyes." Lang returned and found Jar pale with shame. Jar swore he would retire to the mountains and never mix with the world. Lang chuckled and, bending his voice low, offered a different temptation. "If you truly leave the world," Lang said, "I can introduce you to someone who will teach you a way to live beyond dying. Fame will mean nothing, and you will look at your old papers as at a child's rattle." The old idea made Jar's eyes shine. He slept that night with the possibility of a secret doorway in his pockets. At dawn, he left without telling his wife or child. Lang guided him into the deep hills until they reached a cave built like a modest home. There an old man sat pale and quick-eyed, who Lang called Master. "You come too early," the master said, amused. Lang replied, "His mind is set. He begs to be taken." The master nodded toward Jar. "If you would learn the way," he told him plainly, "you must let go of your body." Jar bowed and swore his intention. Lang led him to a neat inner chamber and set him to a thin bed. The room had no shutters, no latticed window bars, just clean air and a small desk. Lang left food and a basket of sweets, and then left with the master. Alone, Jar ate a single cake. It tasted sweet and filled him with a light fullness. He sat and felt as if the air had cleared inside him, as if his flesh had become and shown its own paths and veins, like a map. Then he heard the points of the night, the sound of claws feathering the tiles. A tiger crouched under the eaves, bright eyes like coins. It sniffed near the door. Jar's heart hammered, but he remembered the master's words. He sat perfectly still. The tiger padded in, smelling his feet and legs as if trying to decide if this was prey or relic. It lingered, and then, startled by a racket in the courtyard, perhaps a tide fowl, the beast fled as swiftly as it had come. Jar breathed. He had passed one test. Later, a woman entered, her scent of orchids and the faintest musk of ointment. She moved without a sound, climbed lightly onto the bed, and pressed close. "I'm here," she breathed into his ear, The breath smelled of sweet jelly. Jia kept his eyes closed. "This too must be a test," again she whispered. Then, in a tone that resembled his wife's voice, asked, "Are you asleep?" Jia's eyes twitched. Years before, in the city, he and his wife had used a small phrase, "The mouse has moved," as a private signal to begin their lovemaking when servants or neighbors might be within earshot. She said the phrase now, and the ache inside Jia that he had tried to lock away flew at once. He opened his eyes. It was indeed his wife, carried here by an old woman at Lung's instruction. She clung to him with genuine blame. "You left without a word," she said. Sorrow and anger braided together. Jia soothed her. For a long while they wept together, and then forgot to count the time as they lay entwined. At dawn, a voice like a bell shook the courtyard. The master stormed through with Lung behind him. The old man struck Lung with a stick, reproached him in a voice that made the rafters quake, and then ordered Jia out. Lung told Jia in a weary tone that his path to quick perfection had been pushed too far. "Your human ties are not undone," he said. "Better to return home for a time." Jia scrambled over the low wall and ran down the slope toward his village. He thought of his wife trudging slowly behind and ran faster. From the hillside he saw the village. At first it seemed unchanged. He scampered like a child to the gate and found the house in rubble. The walls patched, the yard altered. People wandered the lanes who did not know him. Nothing in the faces fit the memory he carried. An old man came to the gate, walking with a stick. Jia bowed and asked the way to Jia Fengzi's house. The old man pointed and told a story instead. "Once your master fled when he heard he had passed the exam," the old man said. "When he ran away, his son was only a boy. The old mistress, she slept and did not wake for many years. The boy grew and then died. The family fell into ruin. They rebuilt with brush and wood. Only a month ago she woke. An old 100 years seemed to have passed. People came to see the wonder, but things quieted. You are late, friend." Jia's head spun. He said quietly, "I am Jia Fengzi." The old man stared, then rushed to tell the household. At first, many thought he was an impostor. Only when the old woman herself came out and saw him did she burst into tears, calling him child, husband, a phantom of her past. They took him back into the makeshift home. The rooms smelled of smoke, of spilled porridge, and of the small palms of children who had grown strange. His long-dead son had left 2 grandsons. The elder had died. The younger, Jia Xiang, was a blunt, middle-aged man who did not immediately accept this visitor as his grandfather. There were many descendants, great-grandchildren twice great. They crowded the room in a comic, disordered way, shouting, laughing, and carrying themselves as if the house were a stage. The elder grandson's wife, Wu Shi, was the steady hand. She had come from a household where books had been folded into everyday life, and she treated elders with ritual tenderness. She prepared rough wine and food, bared her chest to the smoke to pull the smell from the rafters, and insisted Jia and his wife join her in a cleared room. The younger grandson Xiang's house was a different thing. Their help came slowly, and sometimes there was not enough. The family rotated duties. Jia felt small, and the air in the room pricked him with regret. The cakes and dishes were plain and oddly spiced. The children ran underfoot, and small smells clung to the pillows. He had returned to find himself ancient in one step and in need of patience. After a few days, Zha grew angry. He could not stomach the crumbs and the old shame. He displeased the second grandson and took his wife away to the eastern village, where he set up a tent and began to teach boys to read for a small fee. He told his wife every evening that this return had been a mistake, that pride and hunger had pushed him into mountains and into folly, and that if he would work again, wealth could be regained. Time trimmed the jagged edges. Wu Shi brought small gifts, continued to care, and gradually the household's fortunes mended. Zha studied again for the exams. He passed the local test, then the provincial. The county magistrate admired him and rewarded him with money. The family lifted its head. Zha reconciled in part with the younger grandson Xiang, paid back debts that his household had forced upon the family, and found a new house where Wu Shi lived with him. He set her clever younger son, Zha Gao, to study with his pupils. The old shame of the mountain felt like an old wound that had scabbed. Years moved. Zha rose at court, became an inquisitor of great name, and rode the rivers of power with a stern face and a lamp of justice. He refused to bow to ministers who traded favors, and because of that, he made enemies. Those who sat in high halls with soft feet and sharp knives began to watch for opportunity. Misfortune came not from the capital, but from his family's back lanes. The younger grandson Xiang had fathered 6 sons who were brash and cruel. They used the influence of their elder to seize fields and bully neighbors. One man, clever and wronged, took a new wife who was then stolen as a concubine by one of Xiang's sons. The man collected allies and marched his complaint up through channels. The accusation reached the capital, and the men who hated Zha used it to strike. Once a minister begins to throw a net, a righteous life can be hauled in. Papers were filed, jealous men swarmed. Zha was locked away and kept in prison for more than a year. In the dark months, 2 of Xiang's sons and Xiang himself fell ill and died in custody. When he was released, Zha was ordered sent into exile at Liaoyang, beyond the border. His life of banners and verdicts had shriveled into rows of staff, and the hard step of an old man leaving the city. They took with him a 16-year-old boy, the son his wife had given in later years, for Zha had no living son of middle age to entrust. Zha's loyal pupil Zha Gao, how he had grown upright and mild, took the boy into his protection. Zha and his wife and 2 servants began the road to the sea. One morning at the shore, the sky was thick and the waves slow. A great ship drifted in, as if it had been carved from mountain. Musicians stood on its deck and sounded drums as if they were calling the wind. A man in a fine robe stepped forward and smiled at Zha. It was Lang Sheng. The men who guarded Zha looked from ship to man and back. The captain of the escort tried to hold him, but Lang called in a voice that warmed the air. Ya saw Laheng across the deck, the smug companion, the one who had pushed the talisman ideas, who had settled tests like chess moves. In surprise and relief, Zha leapt toward the ship, as if a net of home had been cast. No one stopped him. His wife, frantic and unready to be left, ran into the water after him. The ship had already slipped farther from the beach. She dove in, intending to drown herself rather than be torn away. She managed only a few strokes when a white silk sash fell from the side of the ship and wrapped around her hand. A sailor drew her up. She found herself hauled onto the deck and pulled inside. The officer who had escorted Jia shouted and urged his small vessel to row faster. Drums and waves replied. The great ship, singing and full of light, drove forward like an enormous animal. In a blink, it had slipped into the mist and vanished. Jia's servant recognized a face and called it out. Langsheng. Jia stood on the shore with his hands empty and his coat wet from the salt. He realized then that Lang had never been simply a mocker of manuscripts. Lang had been something else, a guide who moved between human courts and other paths. The ship that took him hummed with an order Jia could not expect to follow. The official who had the orders to send Jia away watched him with a strange look. For a long time no one spoke. The tide drew back with the sound of a thin bell. Jia thought of the tiger under the eaves, of the secret mark on his spine that would not wash away, of the sweet bite of the cake in the mountain chamber, of his wife's face when she saw him after 100 years had passed like a blink. He thought of the sham essay written in a joke that had become his credential. He thought of his hand, once steady in law courts, and now empty on the sand. He sat then and let the wind wash his face. The world was a strange ledger, full both of small dishonor and great mercy. In the end, Jia Fengzi became both the hero and the fooled man of his own life. He learned the cost of climbing by tricks and the cost of holding high principle in a crowded hall. He found redemption in family and loss in power. And in the last moment, a friend who was perhaps a spirit or perhaps a path he could not walk. His story is one small recording of how desire and pride bend fate, and how the lines between dream and waking life are often thinner than the ink on a page. The world keeps its strange ways. Men keep their gentle faults.